The great hall of the alien empire was silent. Every noble, every soldier, and every servant stood still. The king of Zareth, tall and cruel, sat on his throne with cold eyes. Before him stood a human, an outsider, who had never expected to be called to such a place. The human's name was Daniel. He was an explorer, a man who had come far across the stars, seeking knowledge and trade. But instead, he found himself in the middle of a royal ceremony he did not understand. At the sound of the royal horn, doors opened, guards stepped forward, carrying between them a fragile figure. It was the alien princess, dressed in silver robes, her face pale and her eyes empty. Her head was bowed, and she moved not with pride, but like someone walking to her own exile. The king's voice boomed across the chamber. "This human," he declared, "has proven himself useful in small matters. Let him be rewarded with something that holds no value in our empire." He raised a hand toward the princess. "My daughter, once believed a treasure, is barren, infertile, and without purpose. She will be his gift, a living reminder of his low place among us." The court gasped. Some laughed quietly. Others whispered. Daniel's heart pounded. A gift? A living person handed to him as if she were nothing more than an object? He wanted to protest, but the sharp eyes of the alien guards warned him to stay silent. The princess finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were a deep shade of violet, filled with a quiet pain. She looked at Daniel not with anger, but with a sorrow so heavy it nearly broke him. She was a prisoner of her father's pride, a symbol of shame, and now his unwanted responsibility. Daniel bowed stiffly, hiding the storm of thoughts inside him. He had heard rumors before rumors of the alien king's cruelty, but he had not believed them until now. The hall was filled with tension. Every noble wanted to see how the human would react. Would he laugh? Would he refuse? Would he accept with arrogance? But Daniel did none of these. He simply walked forward and offered his hand to the princess. For a moment she hesitated, staring at the hand that symbolized both chains and freedom. Then slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in. His gasps spread through the court, because instead of dragging her like a slave, the human held her with respect. The king narrowed his eyes. "Take her and leave, human. You will soon learn that broken things hold no worth." His words struck the air like poison, but Daniel said nothing. He guided the princess away, and the heavy doors of the throne room closed behind them. Outside the palace, the stars burned across the sky. The princess walked silently, her head still lowered. Daniel glanced at her and finally spoke. "My name is Daniel," he said softly. "You don't have to be afraid of me." She did not answer. Her silence was like a wall, strong and painful. After a long moment, she whispered, almost to herself, "They gave me away because I cannot give life. I am a useless daughter, a useless princess, and now, a useless gift." Daniel stopped walking. He looked at her with shock, not because of her words, but because of the weight behind them. He had met warriors, merchants, and rulers across galaxies, but he had never seen someone carry such quiet despair. "You are not useless," Daniel said firmly. "You are a person, not a prize, not a curse." The princess blinked, as if she had never heard such words before. Her lips parted, but no answer came. She turned her face away, hiding the tear that threatened to fall. For Daniel, this was the beginning of something he did not yet understand. For the princess, this was the first time someone had looked at her, not with pity, not with scorn, but with simple human kindness. And yet, far behind them, inside the golden palace, the king sat on his throne with a smile that was not of joy but of cruelty. He believed he had rid himself of a burden, but fate was already moving in secret, preparing a story that would shake the empire. The unwanted gift was not the end. It was only the beginning. The small human ship drifted silently away from the alien capital world. Inside, Daniel sat across from the princess in the narrow cabin. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words and hidden pain. The princess sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, Her silver robe shimmered faintly in the dim light, but her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, refusing to meet his. She looked like a prisoner still. Though no chains bound her wrists, Daniel wanted to speak, yet every sentence he tried in his mind felt wrong. How could he tell her she was not a gift? Not a burden? How could he convince someone who had lived her whole life being told she was worthless? At last he said softly, "Do you have a name?" She blinked, surprised at the question. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Finally she whispered, "Solara." The name hung in the air like music, fragile but beautiful. Daniel nodded. "Solara, I will not treat you the way they did." His voice was steady, though his heart raced. "I don't know why they gave you to me, but I promise you this, I will not hurt you." For the first time, she raised her eyes to him. Her violet gaze searched his face, as if trying to find a lie. She had seen nobles lie, rulers deceive, and servants flatter, but Daniel's eyes carried something different, something she had never seen before. Honesty still. Solara shook her head. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I was given away because I am broken. I cannot give children. I cannot give heirs. What value is a princess who cannot continue the royal line?" Her words struck Daniel like a blade, not because of her condition, but because of how deeply she believed it defined her. He leaned forward, speaking firmly but gently. "You are not broken, Solara. You are more than what they expect from you. You have worth not because of what you can give them, but because of who you are." She looked away quickly, hiding her face. Daniel could see the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes, but she said nothing, only tightened her grip on her robe. It was clear she had heard him, yet her heart was not ready to believe. The days that followed were quiet. Solara spoke little, eating only when Daniel insisted. She spent hours staring out the ship's window, watching stars streak past. Her silence was not anger, but a deep wall built from years of rejection. Daniel, however, did not give up. He cooked meals from his small stores, always offering her the first plate. He adjusted the ship's temperature to her comfort. He even brought out a small old earth book filled with simple tales and read aloud. At first she ignored him, but little by little her head tilted, listening. One night, as he read the story of a bird trapped in a cage, Solara spoke quietly. "The bird is me," she said, almost too softly to hear. Daniel closed the book and looked at her. "Yes," he admitted, "but even birds can fly again if someone opens the cage." For a moment, silence returned, but then Solara asked the question that surprised him. "Why are you kind to me?" Daniel paused, because it was the first time she had asked something from her own heart. He answered truthfully, "Because everyone deserves kindness, Solara, even if the world refuses to give it. Especially then." Her eyes widened slightly. She turned away quickly, but not before he saw the tear that escaped down her cheek. It was not a tear of sorrow this time, but something else, something fragile and dangerous, hope. The next morning, Daniel found her standing near the ship's control panel. She was studying it curiously, her fingers hovering above the glowing symbols. When she noticed him, she stepped back quickly. "I was only looking," she said nervously. Daniel smiled. "You can do more than look. If you want, I can teach you how it works." Her eyes widened again. No one had ever offered her such a thing before. To learn, to control, to have power over her own direction. Slowly she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. I want to learn." And so their bond began to grow. Not through grand gestures, but through small moments. Through shared meals, whispered stories, and lessons under the stars. Solara laughed once, a small sound, but it startled Daniel more than any roar of alien beasts, because it was the first time he had seen life return to her. Yet even as their bond grew stronger, shadows gathered. Far across the stars, in the alien palace, whispers spread. Some nobles mocked the king for giving away his daughter. Others whispered of strange rumors, that the infertile princess was no longer so hopeless. The king heard these whispers, and his anger burned hotter each day. Solara and Daniel did not know it yet, But the bond they were building would soon shake the very foundation of the empire, and the gift that was meant to be worthless was slowly becoming the most dangerous secret of all. The days aboard the small human ship turned into weeks. Darnell and Solara moved in a rhythm of quiet understanding. He spoke little, she spoke less, but slowly her silence changed. It was no longer the silence of fear, it was the silence of trust being built brick by brick. Solara began asking questions. What does this button do? Why does your ship make this sound at night? Do humans always eat together? Her voice was soft, but Daniel noticed the curiosity growing in her eyes. The lifeless princess was slowly returning to life, yet along with curiosity came something else, something Daniel could not ignore. Solara grew pale often. Her hands trembled when she worked too long at the controls. Sometimes she woke in the night clutching her stomach, her breath uneven. At first Daniel thought it was stress, the weight of exile pressing on her. But each passing day, the signs grew harder to dismiss. One morning, Daniel found her near the washroom sink, her face pale, her hands gripping the counter. She had been sick again, and this time she could not hide it. Solara, he said gently, you're unwell. I need to check what's happening. She shook her head quickly. No, it is nothing, just weakness. But her trembling voice betrayed her. Daniel sighed and activated the ship's small medical scanner. Sit, please, he insisted. After hesitation, she obeyed. Lowering herself into the chair, the machine hummed softly, its light sweeping over her. Daniel watched the results appear on the display and froze. His breath caught in his throat, his heart thundering in his chest. Solara frowned at his silence. What is it? She asked. Daniel turned toward her, his voice unsteady. You're not sick, Solara. You're pregnant. The words filled the air like thunder. Solara's violet eyes widened in shock. Her lips parted but no sound came. She shook her head slowly. No. That is impossible. I cannot. I was told since birth. I was told by the royal healers I cannot give life. Daniel showed her the scanner again. The glowing confirmation impossible to deny. Her hands rose slowly, trembling as they pressed against her stomach, her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of disbelief. I am with child? She whispered, a child of two worlds? Daniel knelt before her, taking her shaking hands in his. Yes, he said softly. It's real, Solara. Whatever they told you is wrong. You are not broken. You never were. Her tears fell freely now. All the years of rejection, all the whispers of being worthless, shattered in that single truth. She covered her face with her hands, unable to stop the sobs that broke through. Daniel held her gently, letting her cry, letting her grief and joy pour out. But outside their small world of discovery, whispers had already begun. The alien court was not blind to change. Rumors spread that the infertile princess, given away like trash, had found a strange fate with the human. Some whispered she was growing stronger. Others whispered she was carrying something impossible. The king, hearing these whispers, grew furious. He crushed a golden goblet in his hand. She was a curse. If the rumors are true, then I was made a fool. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Solara's world changed every day. Daniel cooked her meals carefully, making sure she grew stronger. He adjusted the ship's gravity to ease her steps. He even taught her more about the stars, so she would not feel trapped by walls. And in return, Solara began to laugh more often. Her voice no longer trembled with fear but with life. Still, doubt lingered in her heart. What if the child is weak? She asked one night, staring at the stars. What if it does not survive? What if my father hears and destroys us both? Daniel reached out, his hand resting over hers. Then we protect the child, together. His voice carried a certainty that calmed her. Even as fear gnawed at her, Solara turned toward him, her eyes shimmering. You do not know what my father is capable of if he learns of this. He will not stop until he tears the child from me, not because he wants it, but because he hates what it means. Daniel tightened his grip. Then let him try. Because you will have to go through me first. Solara stared at him, stunned. In her world, no one had ever stood for her, not even her own blood. But here was a human, an outsider, promising to fight an empire for her and the child she carried. Her heart ached with something new, something dangerous, hope mixed with love. The ship drifted in silence, carrying them deeper into uncharted space. But beyond, the empire stirred. With unrest, spies carried whispers back and forth, and soon those whispers would become fire. A secret no empire could contain for long, that the infertile princess was carrying the heir of two worlds, and the king, upon hearing it, would not rest until his fury consumed them all. Asterisk, the truth could not stay hidden forever. Secrets whispered in shadows always find a way into the light. Solara's quiet joy aboard Daniel's small ship soon became the most dangerous rumor in the galaxy. On the capital world of Zareth, the alien nobles gathered in glittering halls. They drank from jeweled cups and gossiped with sharp tongues. The infertile princess carries life, one whispered. Impossible, said another, though doubt trembled in his voice. If it is true, then the king has been shamed before all. A third murmured, and with each whisper, the story grew louder until even the palace walls could not hold it back. The king sat on his throne, his jaw tight with fury. He had dismissed his daughter as worthless, infertile, unfit to be part of his royal bloodline. But now the nobles laughed behind closed doors. They said a human had done what no alien prince could achieve. The king's pride, sharper than steel, bled like an open wound. Bring her back. He commanded at last, his voice like thunder. Find the human, find my daughter and drag them before me. Meanwhile, far from the capital, Solara lived in a fragile peace. Her hand often rested on her stomach, where life grew stronger each day. Daniel watched her with quiet awe. For him, the miracle was not only the child, but the way Solara's spirit had changed. The broken princess now smiled, her eyes no longer empty, her voice no longer trembling, but her joy was mixed with fear. I know my father, she told Daniel one night, her voice low. He will not celebrate this. He will see it as betrayal, as an insult to his throne. He will try to take the child from me. Daniel placed his hand over hers, firm and steady. Then we don't let him. This child is not his legacy, it's yours, Solara's. Solara's. Eyes shimmered with emotion. She wanted to believe, yet deep inside, she feared the storm her father would unleash. That storm came sooner than either expected. One morning, as the ship floated near a quiet trade outpost, a warning flashed across Daniel's console. Enemy ships bearing the royal crest of Zareth. They had found them. Solara's heart raced. They've come for me, she whispered, clutching her robe. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not just for you, for the child. The Zareth soldiers stormed the outpost, dragging traitors aside. Word spread like fire. The princess lives, and she carries the impossible. The revelation tore through the galaxy. The infertile princess, given away as worthless, was now carrying the heir of two worlds in the alien court. Nobles argued in chaos. Some shouted, "This is a blessing. A new bloodline, stronger than ever." Others spat, "It is an abomination. A half-human heir cannot sit on our throne." The empire trembled, divided between fear and hope. The king silenced them all with a roar. "This is not hope, this is shame." His voice shook the golden pillars of the throne room. "I will not allow a half-blood to stain my line. Bring her to me alive, but the human kill him." Back on the small ship, Solara felt the child move within her for the first time. Her hand pressed to her stomach, her eyes wide with awe and fear. Daniel knelt beside her, his hand joining hers. "That's your proof," he said softly. "Your father can deny it, the nobles can fight over it, but no one can erase this life. It's real, Solara, and it's ours to protect." Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Then we must run, because when my father sees what I carry, he will stop at nothing to destroy us both." Daniel looked out the window at the stars beyond. He knew she was right, but he also knew something more. This was no longer just about survival. This was about defiance. It was about proving that kindness, love, and unity could challenge an empire built on cruelty. The revelation had spread. The king's fury burned hotter. The nobles sharpened their knives, some for war, some for opportunity, and across the stars, rebels and outcasts whispered of the miracle child, a child who might one day unite human and alien blood. Solara, once the unwanted gift, was now the center of a storm. Her womb carried not only life, but the future, and the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Would this revelation bring hope? Or would it spark a war that would consume them all? The throne room of Zareth shook with anger. The king's hands slammed against the golden arms of his throne, the echo ringing like thunder. Every noble bowed low, afraid to raise their eyes, but even in their silence, whispers danced in the shadows. The impossible truth had spread across the galaxy. The infertile princess, the one he had given away in shame, now carried a child, not just any child, but one fathered by a human. The king's pride burned hotter than fire, he felt. Mocked, humiliated, betrayed. Summon my generals, the king roared. Summon the priests, the healers, the scholars, summon them all. Soon the hall was filled with voices, each one desperate to calm or please their furious ruler. One general fell to one knee. My king, allow us to send more ships. We will hunt down the human, tear him apart, and return the princess before her disgrace grows worse. A priest, his head lowered, spoke cautiously. My lord, forgive me, but the whispers say the child she carries is strong. Perhaps it is not a curse, but a blessing. A sign from the stars. Silence. The king roared, his voice echoing. His sharp claws struck the stone at his feet, leaving deep cracks. A blessing? You dare call this shame a blessing? A half-blood abomination will never inherit my throne. The royal line is pure, and it shall remain pure. The court fell into silence, trembling. No one dared challenge him again. But even as the king spoke, his fury hid a secret fear. If the child was real, and if the nobles saw it as hope, his power might slip from his hands. That fear only made his wrath grow darker. Far away, in the quiet safety of Daniel's ship, Solara sat in silence. Her hand rested on her stomach, her mind heavy with dread. She could almost feel her father's rage stretching across the stars. He will come for me, she whispered, her voice breaking. He will never stop, Daniel. Not until you are dead and the child is gone. Daniel knelt beside her, his eyes steady. Then let him come, he said. We won't run forever, Solara. We'll face him when we must. Solara looked at him with fear, but also with something new: respect, even love. She had lived her whole life in silence, obeying, bowing, hiding. But now, for the first time, someone was ready to fight for her. It gave her courage she did not know she had. The empire stirred as the king's command spread. Fleet after fleet was prepared. Soldiers trained, banners raised. The king's wrath was no longer just words, it was war, in hidden corners of the galaxy. However, whispers grew louder. Merchants, slaves, and rebels spoke of the princess and her child. Some called it blasphemy, others called it salvation. And in those whispers, a movement began to form. One night, aboard the ship, Solara woke with a start. She had dreamt of fire, of her father's voice, of blood spilled in the throne room. She sat upright, trembling. Daniel, half asleep, stirred beside her. What's wrong? He asked softly. Solara turned to him, her eyes fierce despite her fear. I cannot hide anymore, she said. All my life I have been silent, weak, unwanted, but now I carry more than myself. If my father wants to destroy me, then I will stand against him. Not just for me, not just for this child, but for every soul he has crushed beneath his throne. Daniel stared at her, stunned by the fire in her words. The princess who once called herself useless now spoke like a queen. A queen ready to fight for her future. At that same moment, in the capital, the king prepared a grand speech. Before the nobles, the soldiers, the priests, he declared, "The princess is no longer my blood, she is a traitor. She has allied herself with a human, an enemy, and she carries a child that must never be allowed to live." The court roared with mixed cries, fear, rage, disbelief, hope, but the king raised his hand, silencing them. "Any who speak of this child as a blessing shall share her fate." Death, the proclamation rang through the empire. For some, it inspired terror. For others, it planted rebellion. On Daniel's ship, a silent alarm blinked. Sensors caught movements of Zareth's ships drawing closer. Solara stood at the viewport, her hand over her stomach. Her voice trembled, yet her eyes burned with determination. "The king's wrath is come," she whispered, "and this time we cannot run." Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder. "Then we fight, Solara," he said quietly. "For you, for the child, for the future." The king's wrath was no longer just a shadow, it was here, and it would decide whether the heir of two worlds would live or be destroyed. The stars outside the viewport shimmered like cold fire. Daniel's small ship floated in the endless dark, but inside it there was no peace. The royal fleet of Zareth was closing in, engines burning like angry suns. The king's wrath was finally upon them. Solara stood by the window, her hand pressed against her stomach. She felt the life inside her moving, growing, stronger than she had imagined. Her violet eyes glowed with both fear and pride. "This child does not belong to him," she whispered. "It belongs to us." Daniel moved beside her, his jaw set. "And no one will take it away," he said firmly. But inside his heart raced. The fleet was massive. His small ship was nothing against such power. Still, he refused to show weakness. Solara needed strength now, and he would be that strength for her. The ship's alarm rang, a harsh sound breaking the silence. Daniel rushed to the controls. "3 warships," he muttered. "Too close. We can't outrun them anymore." Solara placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then we face them," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, but her words carried steel. Daniel looked at her in surprise. The same princess who once saw herself as broken now stood ready to fight. It filled him with awe and with hope. The warships hailed them, screens flashing with the symbol of Zareth. A commander's voice echoed through the cabin. "Human vessel, surrender the traitor princess, by order of the king. She is to be returned for judgment. Failure to comply will mean your destruction." Daniel's fists tightened on the console. He glanced at Solara. She shook her head slowly, her eyes blazing. "No," she whispered. "I will never return to him." Daniel pressed the come button, his voice sharp. "She is not yours to command. Tell your king his daughter chooses her own future." There was silence, then cold laughter on the other end. "Then you will both die." The first blast shook the ship, lights flickering, metal groaning. Daniel pulled the ship into evasive maneuvers, weaving through debris fields and asteroids. Solara held onto the seat. Her other hand pressed protectively over her stomach. The child inside her kicked again, as if sensing the chaos outside. "Hold on," Daniel shouted as another blast narrowly missed them. The ship rattled, alarms screamed, but somehow he kept control. Solara closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "This life will not end here." Not now. Far away in the capital, the king sat upon his throne, watching the battle through a shimmering projection. His eyes burned with fury. "Destroy the human, capture the girl," he ordered. But one of his advisors spoke timidly. "My king, if the child truly exists, should we not confirm it first?" The king's claws scraped against the arm of his throne. "The child is a lie, a disgrace. It cannot be allowed to live. Do as I command." But whispers in the court continued to grow. Some nobles now doubted, others believed the child could be the key to a new future. The empire itself was beginning to fracture. Back in the ship, Daniel's hands moved quickly over the controls. He launched decoys, diverted power, twisted through the void like a hunter evading a predator. But the warships were too strong. One blast struck the side of the vessel, throwing sparks across the cabin. Solara cried out as she was thrown against the wall. Daniel rushed to her side, fear gripping him. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, breathing hard. "No, but the child." "It moved, Daniel. It is strong." Her voice broke with awe. "This is no ordinary child. It feels different." Daniel held her hand, his gaze fierce. "Then we fight harder." "Because this child is meant to live," he returned to the controls, pushing the ship toward a hidden moon nearby. "If we can reach the caves, we can hide," he muttered. Solara closed her eyes, whispering prayers in her native tongue, but deep inside, she felt something rising, not just fear, but power, as if the child inside her carried more than blood, as if it carried destiny. The warships followed, their weapons glowing. The chase became a storm of fire and shadows, and in that storm, a legend was beginning. A human and an alien princess, united not by war or politics, but by something greater. The child they carried was not just an heir, it was a bridge between two worlds, a hope that terrified kings and inspired whispers across galaxies. In the dark cave of the moon, as the ship settled with smoke and sparks, Solara leaned back, exhausted. Her hand never left her stomach. Her eyes burned with determination. "The king will come himself," she whispered. "He will not stop until he stands before us." Daniel looked at her, then at the stars beyond. "Then let him come," he said, "because when he does, the world will see who truly deserves the throne." The heir of two worlds was not yet born, but already it had changed everything, and the galaxy waited for the storm to break. The cave on the barren moon was dark and silent. Daniel's small ship rested broken against the rocks. Its engines burnt out after the chase. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and fear, but also with something far stronger, hope. Solara lay on the narrow bed, her breaths uneven, her hands pressed against her stomach as pain rippled through her body. Daniel knelt beside her, panic in his chest. "It's too soon," he whispered. "The child is coming now." Solara's violet eyes shone through the pain. "It was always meant to be now," she said softly. Her voice trembled, yet it carried unshakable strength. "This child will not wait. It will be born under fire, under war, because it is meant to change everything." Before Daniel could answer, alarms blared again. The scanners lit up more ships approaching. But this time, it was not just soldiers. At the center of the fleet was a massive vessel, black and gold, the royal flagship of the king himself. Daniel's face hardened. "He's here," he muttered. Solara's breath caught, but she did not falter. "My father has come to see with his own eyes. He wants to take the child, but he cannot, not now." The ground trembled as the royal ship landed, outside the cave. Hundreds of armored soldiers lined up in formation. At their head walked the king of Zareth, tall, armored in crimson, his eyes burning with wrath. He entered the cave like a storm, his voice filling the air. "Daughter," he thundered, "you shame me for the last time. Give me the child, and I will grant you a quick death. Refuse, and both you and your human will suffer." Solara struggled to sit, her body racked with pain. But she raised her head, her eyes locking with his. "I will never give you this child," she said. Her voice was weak yet unyielding. "This child is not yours. It is mine, ours," she whispered, her hand finding Daniel's. The king's claws flexed in rage. "Defiance until the end. So be it," he growled, raising his blade. But before he could strike, Daniel stepped between them, his weapon drawn, his stance firm. "If you want her, you go through me," he said coldly. His voice echoed against the cave walls. The king laughed bitterly. "You are nothing, human, one swing, and you will be dust." But Daniel did not move. He had no army, no power, no throne, only courage, and that was enough. Because behind him, Solara cried out, and with her cry came the cry of new life. The sound froze the cave. A wail, small yet powerful, filled the darkness. Solara held the child in trembling arms, her tears streaming down her face, the baby's. Skin shimmered faintly with alien light, but its eyes were bright and human. The heir of two worlds had been born. The king's blade lowered slowly. His eyes widened as he stared at the child. For the first time in his reign, his voice faltered. This cannot be, he whispered. But even as he denied it, he saw the truth. The child was strong, alive, radiant with a presence that felt greater than bloodlines and thrones. Behind the king, whispers began among the soldiers. Some stepped back, their faces uncertain. A soldier whispered, "A miracle," another murmured, "The future." The king spun toward them, his rage boiling. "Silence, this is no heir. This is corruption." But the words rang hollow, because the child's cry was louder than his fury. It was the cry of hope, echoing against stone and steel. Solara's voice rose, filled with strength born from love and pain. "Father, you ruled through fear, but fear ends today. This child is not your shame, it is your end." The king raised his blade once more, but this time his own soldiers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons, torn between loyalty and belief. Daniel raised his weapon, standing firm. Solara held the child close, her violet eyes burning with defiance. For one long moment, the cave trembled with the weight of decision, and then slowly, the first soldier dropped his weapon. Then another and another, the sound of steel against stone filled the air. The king turned in horror as his army bent their knees, not to him, but to the child. "No!" The king roared, "This is my throne, my empire." But his voice was drowned by the silence of his people, the silence of loyalty leaving him. Solara stood, weak yet unbroken, her child in her arms, Daniel at her side. She stepped forward, her voice clear. "You ruled with cruelty, but the future will be ruled with unity. The heir of two worlds will bring a new dawn." The king staggered back, his face pale with rage and disbelief. For the first time he saw the truth. He had already lost, not by sword, not by war, but by hope itself. As dawn broke over the barren moon, light spilled into the cave. Daniel wrapped his arm around Solara. The child nestled between them, its small eyes open, watching the light. The galaxy would remember this moment, the night the unwanted princess and the human defied a king, and the day the heir of two worlds was born. It was not just a birth, it was the beginning of a new age, a new dawn.